G'day guys, this is Bruce here. Just back having a look at the CBR. I've had my CBR actually in storage now for a little bit of time. I had it sitting in there, I was planning on sort of working over in my storage unit, but it never happened, you know, because it just wasn't close enough to me, so I just never did anything with it. So I decided recently with this COVID-19 thing, it's time to get rid of the storage. It's cost me a whole heap of money every month, and I just wasn't really utilising it. So I've brought the bike back to my garage, and we're going to get started on it again. I just, because it had been sitting for probably about, I don't know, I guess it's been sitting for 4 or 5 months, I decided to just quickly put the carburetors back on and just fire it all up and make sure everything was working, which it was. It took a few attempts to get it started because I couldn't find the plugs, which I had removed. But anyway, I've got the bike started, and now I've just been playing around with the switch controls. So for those of you who've been watching, and those of you who haven't, basically what happened was that the switch controls on this bike were, well, the switch blocks were really, really old. They were just in a terrible state. One of them had some broken bits and pieces on it to do with the high beam and the low beam and stuff like that, and I just wasn't happy with that stuff, and I wanted to replace them with new controls. So I got a new start-stop control here and a new switch block for the lighting control side. Part of the problem was that there's a few differences with the new controls as opposed to old controls, and I'll show you that stuff in a minute. I'll drag them out. I'll show you what we've got and what I've done and how I've sort of fixed that up. This is a job, to be fair, where you need a reasonable level of electrical knowledge. If you don't have a reasonable level of electrical knowledge, just pay someone to do this or don't bother to do it at all, because it's quite a few hours work to work it out. And you can spend a considerable amount of time doing this particular job if you want to do it nice and tidy. So now what I'll do is I'll show you the controls and how I sort of work those out, and I'll show you the new controls and what the differences are. So this is the first of the controls that was on it. This is my start run control. So we obviously had run, off, and we had a start button on the bottom of it, and that's all it had. And then it has a couple of connectors on the side of it, and these would normally go off to your brake switch. So the brake switch is actually wired in on the end as well, and obviously it had a plug on the end which I've cut off. This is a fairly simple one to work out because obviously it doesn't have many cables going into it at all. It's really just, you know, 5 cables. So a couple of them are to do with with this, and the rest are to do with the start, stop, run, start part on the bike, so that doesn't really take long to work out. So when I go to the new control down here, the problem that I have is that not only have I got a run and stop and a start, I've now got a light control switch. So I had lights off, park lights and running lights, and the ability to turn them off, but obviously in the original controller they weren't on that side. And now I'll show you the switch block side, which was on the other side where I had my main problem because it was in a state. So this is the control that was in a real state. We had high-low here. It's really well weathered. This was off, accessory and main lights on. And that obviously, you know, it's been broken. Someone's just screwed a screw. This is really common. My 400 has the same problem. These obviously just must break off over time. I mean, it's a pretty old bike. And then we had our indicator controls, you know, left, right, so on, cancel, horn switch, and a passing light switch on the top of the control. And that's all that control had. And I'll show you the new control and what the new control's got. Okay, so with this controller, what we have is we have our low beam, high beam, indicators left and right and so on, which everyone understands, a horn control down the bottom. And then we had a new control here, which was a hazard lights control, which will turn all your indicators on at once. And then on the top of the control, it has this passing light switch on it, which is pretty standard. So most of the stuff's standard. In fact, the control here for the hazard lights, this would be pretty standard, I think, on most new bikes as well. But it certainly wasn't available on older bikes. So yeah, so obviously we've got these differences in the controls, the light switch being on the opposite side, and then the other difference being the hazard control switch on this side of the switch block, which is all fine. It just means you've got to work the wiring out, and it's quite time consuming to work this wiring out. It shouldn't be, because actually when you buy these controls, they actually do come with a wiring diagram. But you know, as most things I buy and try, these were Chinese, and of course the wiring diagram that came with them didn't correspond to the colours of wires that were on them, so really I had to just begin from scratch and work all the wires out, trace all the wires back to which switches did what. So that was a good few hours work involved in that, because it's a fairly involved setup. Yeah, probably, probably if you bought good quality controls, like if you bought maybe Honda controls off a CBR1000 or something else that were the same size and that you knew that were going to fit, you wouldn't have these problems because you could probably download the Honda wiring controls. And the second problem I did have actually was to do with the Honda wiring, but again, because these bikes are, even though there's a lot of these bikes around, there isn't really good wiring information around on these bikes. And so I have wiring diagrams for these bikes for the switches, but again, the color codes, obviously over the years, they've changed the color codes, and the wiring diagram that I had, and I had 3 different wiring diagrams. All the color codes were all just completely wrong. They just didn't suit the wiring. So again, I had to work that stuff out manually. So what I did to solve this is I basically got my multimeter on the end of these, and then I labelled all of them, so I knew what they were. So indicator right, indicator left, horn, high beam, low beam, and so on. And obviously there's some common wires in this lot as well. Once you have that level of wiring, then it becomes easier to marry this to the new controls. Still time consuming, but it can be done. And that's basically what I did. So that basically consumed the best part of the day by the time I got all of those controls working, by the time I worked out what each control did, where it went, and where it went on the old plugs. And then what I did is I thought, well, I'm never going to use the original controls again, so I've cut the plugs off. Because the original controls come with these kind of plugs, which are all, they're quite nice waterproof plugs, but obviously they don't correspond to the wiring loom that I have on this bike. And what I wanted to make sure that in the future, if I did decide to go back to original controls, or if I found a good set of original controls I was happy with, I wanted the ability to be able to plug them in without actually changing my main wiring loom. So it was just better to stick with the standard plugs. Probably if I'd searched around online, maybe I could have found plugs for the end of this, but since I wasn't going to use those, it didn't matter, so I reused them. So I'll show you now what's been done at the front very, very, very quickly. Okay, so what I've got in here is all the original plugs are all hidden beneath the sheath, and this is where I've actually, what I've done is I've heat shrink some wires together, retaped them, and put an extra wire in here as well. This is an extra wire that goes to the clutch control, and the reason I had to do that was because the main switch didn't have enough wires in it basically to do it the way I needed to do it for this particular bike. That might change depending on the bike you have, and I've just retaped it all up, recovered it all back in, and it's all waterproofed in there now, and it's all plugged in and it all works. So now what we'll do is we'll show you how this works. So this switch, it had the clutch control cables that went up into here, but the way it was done in the original loom was no good, so I cut the original loom off and I've put my own couple of wires in here with a bit of extra waterproof sheathing all through here, and it's all in there okay now. So now we have everything wired up properly. We have this all happening, all the switches happening. The other thing I should say here too, I guess, is that a lot of the bikes that were kind of around the 90s, just after these years, the bikes before that all had the ability to turn the lights off, and then they had a law change, certainly in Australia and New Zealand, and I think in certain parts of Europe, where you had to have your lights on all the time, and it was to do with safety. So I like the ability of being able to turn my lights on and off. So if I have a flat battery, or my battery's going flat and I haven't quite got enough power to power my lights and my starter, I can actually physically turn my lights off, so I can start my bike and things like that. So there are some advantages to being able to switch your lights off. But with modern bikes, you don't have that ability anymore to actually switch them off. One other thing I should say about the controllers is the original controllers that are on these bikes have very, very good thick gauge wiring on them. These newer type switches have much, much thinner gauge wiring in them. I mean, they shouldn't be carrying a ton of current, so it shouldn't really matter, but I just like the wiring that was on the original controllers much better, because it just simply had that better level of or heavier gauge of wiring inside it, which I thought was a good thing. So that's the only detrimental thing that I've seen with this whole setup at the moment. Not that it's affected it so far, and I certainly haven't had failure, and I've done this a few times now, but still it is something you do need to consider. Okay, so the first thing we've got is our park lights. Then we've got our main lights, low beam, high beam. We've got the passing light, which is just here. And again, if we were off, the passing light would still work. We've got the horn. And the other new thing that we've got is the hazard lights, so which is great, because normally you don't have this on a CBR250RR. And then obviously we've got the normal indicator and cancellation stuff working. Just do that again. And it's all working beautifully inside the control here. The start works on this, but obviously we haven't got the right start at the moment. So yeah, so that's basically the whole thing running, which is awesome. So the next thing I want to break out is I've got the fairing kit for this bike, and I want to unwrap that fairing kit and have a look at it, and we might install that on the bike. Even though we're not quite finished on the bike, it would still be quite nice to actually do a test fit of that fairing kit, so that's what we'll do next. Okay, so here we have the CBR250RR MC22 fairing kit, which I'll show you in a second. We're going to unwrap it, we're going to have a look at it, see what it comes with. Have a look at the condition of the panels. Hopefully it's all arrived okay. One of the problems that we do have when we're shipping panels is because these panels are shipped all the way from our factory in China, they sometimes get damaged on the way, even though they're packed quite well. So hopefully there's no damage in this kit. This is quite a light kit, and it's not too many panels in this one, so generally these kits usually are okay, but we won't know until we get inside it and open it up and have a look. One of the problems we are having at the moment is during this COVID-19 crisis, we can't ship kits, so we've been out of action now for almost 3 months, which is very frustrating. Whether we'll be able to get back in action selling fairing kits at the other end, I don't know, but anyway, in the meantime, I can show you what we've got. What we've got here, it's similar to the CBR1000RR kit in the background here, same sort of process. This kit, when I had it made, I ended up having to get it made twice because there's actually 2 different colour schemes. There's a red, white and blue, and a blue, white and red or something like that. They look very similar, and accidentally the factory supplied me with the wrong kit the first time, so we had to get it redone. So it'll be interesting to see how this kit looks because it has been painted twice. And I have a few other kits actually in my van that I'm going to be selling very shortly as well, and they will be factory seconds and they'll be sold quite cheap, and I'll list what those kits are on the site very, very soon. And there'll be good opportunities for those guys around that, you know, have got those models of bikes and want to snap up a fairing kit at a good price, because at the moment you will not be able to buy fairing kits anywhere except for OEM stuff, and even that might even be technically hard while the border's closed. Anyway, without further ado, we'll get into opening this box. Let's have a look and see what we've got. Okay, so let's get into the box. Let's get it opened and see what's in here. So heat shield, decent amount of it, foam backed. It's pretty average quality of the stuff, but it's better than nothing, and it's free. It comes with the kit. Free screen. Hopefully that's in good nick. Sometimes they get a little bit scratched. Now, one other thing I should mention with screens is that we, with the screens, we can actually sell dark tint screens or clear screens. I prefer clear screens for my bike, so I always order a clear screen, but you have to specify if you want a clear screen, and it depends if you have it in stock or not. But typically a kit will come with a dark tint screen, which is a very, very dark, almost black screen, and they're free with the kits. And this is pretty much how the rest of it comes packed. So as you can see here, it's pretty well packed. Everything's packed in like a foam. So one of the things that I should quickly mention is when you get a fairing kit, the thing that you need to do is you need to unpack everything and check all the panels for damage. So that's pretty important when you get a new fairing kit, because if we sell you a fairing kit, for example, we want to know if it's been damaged in transit, and so you need to be able to open the box fairly quickly, lay all the parts out on top of the foam wrap, and take photos of anything if there's anything damaged, so that we can see how it's been damaged and figure out what we're going to do about it. We do offer transit insurance as well when we sell fairing kits. So I'm going to unwrap these now. We're going to put them off to the side, and then we can have a look at what we've got here. Okay, so by now you would have seen that we've basically unwrapped all the fairings. Now we'll just go over the fairings and we'll show you what can happen while they're in transit, colour differences and stuff like that before we start fitting the kit. So overall I'm pretty happy with this kit actually. The decals and everything are pretty much spot on. So it's pretty much exactly as I asked, which is good. few minor little things, but they're very minor. Colours are good. I asked for the inside of the front uppers to be painted on these ones, which they've done, which is also good, because this is, you know, you see a lot of this on the inside of here when it's on the cockpit of the bike. You're going to see it, and I didn't want the overspray in there, so I asked them to spray the inside of this, and that's good. What has happened in transit is it has managed to rub through in a couple of little areas. So just here you can see it where it's rubbed through, which is kind of annoying. Same on the other corner here, you can see it, it's just rubbed through there. A little bit on the fronts, on these front edges here, especially on that one there, you can notice it there. So you can see that there, that's what's happened. Otherwise that panel's pretty good, there's nothing really wrong with it, it's pretty decent, I'm pretty happy with it. So this is the front guard. Everything's been painted, actually all of the white paint is painted with a slight pearl in it, which is quite nice. It's a bit hard to see in this kind of light, but looking up close I can see the pearl in it, and the finish on this is actually very good. There's no real flaws on the front guard. The front guard's pretty perfect, which is great. Side panels. The R's a little bit not quite perfect. CBR should be a little bit lined up more perfectly than that. It's not quite perfect. Super response quarter's good. Colours are good. A little bit of bleeding around the edges, but it's very, very minor. Overall, the panel is pretty good. Pretty nice. I can't really see any other flaws on this panel. These panels are all pretty good. They're all pretty nice. That's had the inside sprayed a little bit as well, just to kind of tidy it up, which is good. But this inside of this one wouldn't really matter actually, because you're not gonna see the inside of this anyway. So I wouldn't really have worried about that. Opposite side, again, same thing. Finish is very good. The CBR is much more perfect on this one. See, and this is where with aftermarket stuff, because they're placing decals by hand, sometimes, if they don't quite spend enough time lining it up, then it doesn't look quite perfect. Everything else on that's good. That panel's pretty good, pretty happy with it. It's pretty nice finish overall. Oh, the blue actually, by the way, too, the blue has actually got a pearl in it as well, so it's a slight flake through it, but it's very, very minor. Side panels. So the side panels, I'm pretty happy. We did get something coming through on the bottom of this panel, but this is only on the surface, and this is something that we'll polish out for sure. So a little bit of cutting compound on that, or a little bit of rubbing, probably even rubbing with a rag would probably actually just wipe that pretty much off. Otherwise, that panel's pretty perfect. The RR, everything else, all the writing is good. The mark, there's just no real marks or anything. Slight mark on the corner here, where it's touched on something somewhere along the line. Front, everywhere else is good. Every other in some of this panel is good. That's really the only damage is really on that corner. Very, very minor. Rear panel that goes between the lights, pretty good. The Honda's good. Everything's good on it. No marks on it. No scuffs on it. It's perfect. It's exactly what I would expect. A couple of other little infill panels that go with the bike. I think they go up around the front or something like that. I'm not quite sure 100% where they go, but we'll figure it out once we get it together. And the opposite side panel. And this panel was all very good. It didn't, except for it did get a mark. It did get some damage on it. So this is typical shipping damage. And what's happened here is something has actually poked through the probably another corner of another panel's managed to poke through, and it's slightly damaged the H on the Honda here. Some of the scuffing's on the surface, so some of this will polish out, but where it's on the red there, that's definitely cut through to the underneath. So it's actually cut through the decal right to the underneath of the panel. It's not nice when you can't see my head and face when we're talking. Yeah, it's much better. Just tell me if you can't see my head, okay? So yeah, so where it's cut through, it's just cut through. It's cut through a little bit here, which is very annoying. And that's the kind of thing that can happen. And the thing with damage like this is a minor piece of damage, and so what would happen typically is that the factory wouldn't cover that kind of damage. That wouldn't be covered under a warranty type claim or anything like that, which is quite frustrating. I think most of this, I think that we can probably rub some of this out, and I think we can probably get rid of this, and we'll just give it a quick rub now with a rag, and we'll see how it's going to come up. So the best thing to use to just clean up anything that's sticky, and this has got a little bit of sticky marks on it, is to use a little bit of WD-40 on a rag, and this works pretty good at getting sticky stuff off. So this is the first thing I would use, because this is not abrasive and it's not harsh on the panel neither. So we don't want to be using abrasive things on the panel when we don't have to. So now we'll get in here and we'll just give it a clean. Yeah, and see, as you can see there now, that's cleaned up pretty good. In fact, you know, we have one little scratch there on the H, just the very top of the H. It's been slightly dented there, where it's sort of dented the decal, and it's cut just the very top of the decal where it's come through. You know, to me, I think, even though that's annoying, it's kind of acceptable on this panel when you think about the panel overall. When we look at the cost of the panel, how far it's come, how far it's shipped, and everything else, we'd live with that bit of difference, that bit of damage there. So in an ideal world, it would be ideal to not have any damage at all on panels. I mean, obviously it's very frustrating if you order a brand new kit and then it comes and it has some damage on it, but you know, when we're dealing with China and we're dealing with other countries, this is one of the things that we have to expect, is that sometimes there is going to be damage, and there's not really a lot we can do about this. It is really hard to deal with this sort of thing. Very frustrating. I had a little bit of damage on my Red Bull kit when I got it, but I think, you know, after looking at my Red Bull kit and this kit, I think that fitted on the bike, this stuff is so minor. When I think about the cost of the fairing kit, you know, as I say, this kit I think is about, well, it used to be before we had the exchange rate changes, I think these kits were around the $650 mark, something like that, for a full kit painted and decaled. So not too bad, and pretty minor. I'm pretty happy with this overall. I think it's a pretty good finish. It's a pretty good kit. So next thing to look at is we'll just have a look at the colour up against the tank, and I'll show you a couple of things around the tank and the side colours and things like that. Okay, so normally if your tank's in perfect condition, mine's not in perfect condition, but if your tank was in perfect condition, the issue is going to be that if we have a fairing kit that's got a tank cover, can we match the panels to the tank cover? And the answer is no, we cannot. We can't do it 100%. We can't do it 100% for a couple of reasons. One of them is that we simply don't have the tank in front of us, and we don't have the paint, and we don't have the colour, and even if we had the colour codes, we have different colour systems that we're using as opposed to Honda colour systems. So that's the first issue. And the second issue is, even if you send us those colour codes and we try to do a comparison, it's still not going to be 100%. And also because we're producing stuff on volume, and the guys are working pretty quickly in the factory, and they're pretty proficient at mixing paints up, and they'll mix up to what they think is the closest match. So and there's a lot of different colours on Hondas, you know, and it depends whether it's original or it's been painted and all those kinds of things. So so what we've got here basically is we've got a good example of this. So we have obviously the red and the blue, which you can see here. So the red that we've got on here, this is a much darker red. It's changed colour over the years. This is a lighter red. This is a slightly darker blue, and this is a slightly lighter blue. So they're the kind of differences that you would have to live with. And if you couldn't live with those differences in colour, then the best thing to do is to paint your tank to match the fairing kit once you've got the fairing kit. And that is still actually the cheapest option. It's still actually the best option, because in the case of this, I don't have a perfect tank, so it'd be much nicer to have the tank painted. Now, the thing is, painting a tank in Australia or New Zealand, and maybe in other countries as well, it can get quite pricey, because you've got, for example, here you've got lots of different decals, you've got different colours, and every time this tank has to be painted and it has to be finished and it has to go in and out of an oven, you get charged. So yeah, the cost of painting a tank might be, you know, a minimum cost usually of one colour paint is usually $250, $300, and it goes up from there. The more colours you have, the more it's going to cost. I would imagine that a tank like this, if you get all the decals done and everything, you could probably spend $600 just on the tank. But if you want your bike to look perfect, you'd spend the money and you'd do it, because even if you spent $1,000 on your tank, and you spent say $600 or $700 on your fairing kit, you have a $1,700 paint job on your bike with all the decals and everything all looking perfect, and it's still fairly cheap in the scale of things when you look at the whole thing. Okay, so one of the things that we can do with a fairing kit, or normally can do with a fairing kit when there's no coronavirus going on, is we can send tank decals. So I got these tank decals sent out with my tank. so that if I got the tank sprayed, which was what I was planning on doing, then I could get all of the decals redone. Now the complication with this is if you have a lot of stripes around the side of the tank like I do here, some of this is paint, like that's painted, that's a decal, this is a decal, then you'd have some problems. And I'm not sure actually, I can't remember from my drawings whether this is actually the correct tank decal for the side of the tanks. And it's another reason I don't like doing this, because we'll do this for free and we send these for free, but if they're wrong it's a problem, and then it could cost $50 to send another set out because the freighting is expensive. So when we do this as a courtesy for customers. It's just a freebie that we do if we do it at all, and you have to really accept what you get. What you get is what you get at the end of the day, unless you want to pay for another lot of shipping. If you want to pay for the shipping, it's fine, we'll redo it, we'll send you some more if they're wrong. But anyway, this is not a bad idea if you're going to get your tank painted, because then you have the main decals. The other stripe around the side, you'd either have to have that painted or you'd have to have some vinyl cut to actually suit that. I would probably get vinyl cut for this one. I think I'll probably get it vinyl wrapped. I think it's probably the easiest way to do it. Anyway, that's pretty much it. That's pretty much how this whole thing works. That's the CBR250RR kit. It's good to have one of these kits and to be able to show you one. We've sold a ton of those kits over the years. One of the things that I will be doing, probably not today now because I'm running short on time, but tomorrow I'll be starting to fit this kit and we can quickly do a quick filming and tell you any hassles we have. One of the hassles I am going to have at the moment, I think, is I don't have a whole bunch of bolts and walnuts and things like that, and I've got to figure out where I'm going to get those from, because they're a bit hard to order at the moment. But they're good for putting the screen on and stuff, and I'll show you that stuff tomorrow. So anyway, that's enough for today, and I think that's about all I can talk about for now in regards to all of this stuff. So we'll see you guys soon and get back into it. Thanks, bye.